Aardman Animations, the crown jewel of British stop motion, and I would go as far as to say national treasures. These guys have been quietly dominating the world of animation for decades, creating some of the most beloved characters ever, such as Wallace and Gromit, Shaun the Sheep, and those anthropomorphic escape artist chickens. The kind of stuff that gives you a warm, nostalgic glow just by thinking about it. But what really sets Aardman apart is how they've stuck to their roots. In a world where CGI is king, they're still there, meticulously shaping bits of clay into stories full of heart, humour, and very British charm. Today, I'm diving into their journey, from their humble beginnings in the 1970s to becoming an Oscar-winning powerhouse, all while staying true to the painstaking magic of stop motion. Let's go back to the 1970s. Back when Peter Lord and David Sproxton were just a couple of schoolmates messing around with animation. They officially registered the name Aardman Animations in 1972. And fun fact, the name came from a character they made from combining the words aardvark and Superman, because they thought the word aardvark was hilarious? Sure, I suppose it is. They made a short piece with the character. He was kind of a nerdy Superman type. It then got purchased by the BBC, which led to the official founding of Aardman. Fast forward to 1976, when they moved to Bristol and produced their first proper professional work. One of their standout early creations was Morph, a little bendy clay character with a knack for getting into all kinds of trouble. He became a bit of a celebrity after appearing on the British kids show Take Heart, appearing in a bunch of 1-minute long shorts. The typical setup would cut from Tony Hart to Morph, who would be off on some comedic adventures, getting into mischief, transforming into things, or just talking in his signature squeaky gibberish. Now, while Peter and David had an excellent track record in children's entertainment, they had much bigger ambitions. They wanted to prove that stop-motion animation wasn't just for young people, it could tell stories for adults too. In 1982, they teamed up with Channel 4 and created Conversation Pieces, a series of shorts that paired animated puppets with real-life conversations. It was clever, funny, and oddly touching. Like hear your neighbour ramble on and on about something mundane, but somehow it's art. Around this time, a young animator named Nick Park was studying at the National Film and Television School in Beaconsfield. Nick was working on a student film you may have heard of called A Grand Day Out, and he was also a huge fan of Aardman. So much so, in fact, that he invited Peter and David to give a talk at his school. Nick's story is just as charming as his characters. When he needed materials for his project, he wrote to Harbut, the company that invented non-drying clay, asking if they could hook him up with some free plasticine. Incredibly, they said yes, and in exchange, he promised to credit them in his film. They even sent him a massive block in 10 different colours, including a shade called Stone, which ultimately became Gromit's signature hue. The plot of A Grand Day Out? Well, Nick's not shy about admitting he wasn't the greatest scriptwriter at the time. The premise was simple. A guy builds a rocket in his basement to go to the moon because, obviously, it's made of cheese. At one point, there was even a moon McDonald's serving banana milkshakes. The first idea for the script was going to turn into a 4-hour-long film. And if you know how painstakingly slow stop motion is, you'd realize Nick might still be animating it to this day. Thankfully, Peter and David gave him some advice. Perhaps you should cut it down a little bit? Gromit was conceived as Wallace's silent but incredibly expressive dog, while Wallace, a hapless inventor and a cheese enthusiast, came to life with the voice of Peter Sallis. Sallis, best known for Last of the Summer Wine, agreed to voice Wallace for 50 whole Great British pounds. 6 years later, when Nick finally called to say that the project was finished, Sallis's response was, me. Nick's journey wasn't exactly smooth sailing. In the first year, and not through lack of trying, he only managed to shoot 1 page of the script. By 1985, Nick had joined Aardman full-time, and they offered to help him finish his film, on the condition that he helped with their projects too. Speaking of other projects, Aardman wasn't just sitting around waiting for Wallace and Gromit to take off. They were involved in animating various projects, perhaps most notably the award-winning music video for Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer. Now, if you haven't watched this one before, I strongly recommend it. It's truly iconic and involved a heck of a lot of work. Now, if Peter Gabriel can lie under a sheet of glass for 16 hours while they film the video one frame at a time, the least we can do is take 5 minutes to watch and appreciate it. Oh, and the song is a certified banger too. Finally, in 1989, after 7 long years of work, A Grand Day Out was finished, and the world met Wallace and Gromit for the first time. After A Grand Day Out rocketed Wallace and Gromit into our hearts and, well, to the moon, Park and Aardman were eager to keep the momentum going. The BBC paid the studio to create another adventure, and Nick Park had a bunch of ideas bouncing around for what would eventually become The Wrong Trousers. One was about a pair of high-tech trousers that let Wallace walk up walls, and another was a story about a penguin lodger named Feathers McGraw. There was even a version with a whole flock of penguins wreaking havoc in the house. But animating all those beady little eyes, no. That idea was swiftly binned, primarily due to budget reasons. The story only started finally clicking into place once Aardman co-founder Peter Lord suggested, what if the penguin was a villain? Suddenly, the film evolved into a Hitchcock-style thriller, but with more clay and less stabbing. And wow, does it lean into those Hitchcock vibes. The way Feathers McGraw creeps around, the dramatic lighting, the tension-building shadows, it's like Hitchcock, but with a tiny, flightless antagonist. Feathers' cold, calculating stare is pure villainy. As a child, I remember watching that one scene where the penguin slowly turns his head towards Gromit, and I was terrified. A clay penguin? Who knew that could be so terrifying? On a technical level, The Wrong Trousers takes the animation from the first film and cranks it up to 11. In A Grand Day Out, everything was charmingly stiff, and only one thing ever really moved at a time. If Wallace wiggled his eyebrows, the rest of his face sort of took a break. But now, the characters practically leap off of the screen. Take Gromit reading his newspaper, for example. He doesn't have a mouth. He doesn't say a word, yet his expressive ears and his subtle glances give him so much character. It's this wonderful level of detail that doesn't push the plot forward whatsoever, but it just builds so much personality. The designs got an upgrade as well. Wallace's chin got a bit wider to really lead into that trademark grin, inspired by the way Salis really drew out the word cheese. And Gromit's eyes were spaced further apart, boosting his expressive charm. The designs nailed the perfect balance here. The characters still felt grounded in their wonderfully ordinary British middle-class world, like Wallace's cozy green cardigan. But they also leaned fully into the larger-than-life absurdity of the story's chaos. And the dialogue? Barely there. Wallace rambles on, thanks to Peter Salis' brilliant delivery, but everything else is just pure visual genius. Gromit's side eyes and Feathers' unnervingly still menace do all of the heavy lifting. It's storytelling at its finest. Why talk when a perfectly timed glance can say it all? And then there's the legendary train chase at the end. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And I mean, who am I kidding? Of course you've seen it. Gromit frantically laying down all those train tracks whilst he's riding a toy train, Feathers calmly loading a gun. It's chaos, it's hilarious, and it's stop-motion brilliance at its peak. The Aardman team themselves consider it the best thing they've ever animated, and it's really easy to see why. Considering how painfully slow stop motion is, it's mind-blowing to think about how they pulled this off. Every frame meticulously planned, every movement flowing perfectly. It's comedy, it's tension, it's art. Peter Lord summed up what the film meant to Aardman. It's the expression of what we've always believed in, that you can do successful long-form films using this technique. Although it's Nick's film, it's our statement as a group about what is right about an animated film. That it's a film first and foremost, and, incidentally, it's also animated. For many fans, The Wrong Trousers is the ultimate Wallace and Gromit adventure. It's their favourite, the best of the series. It consistently comes up in top animated films of all time, and is considered by critics to be a pinnacle of British cinema. Even to this day, it holds up as a perfect blend of quirky British humour, lovable characters, and meticulously detailed craftsmanship. Oh, and it also brought home an Oscar for Best Animated Short Film, thus cementing Aardman's reputation as a global animation powerhouse. This wasn't just a film, it was a statement that stop motion could deliver storytelling just as rich and powerful as any mainstream Hollywood production. While A Close Shave was not deemed to be as groundbreaking or revolutionary as The Wrong Trousers, it still raised the stakes for Aardman's animation. The visuals were sharper and more detailed, with improved clay models, richer backgrounds, and some clever special effects that made the world of Wallace and Gromit feel even more vibrant. Add in a few new characters, and the universe just kept expanding in exciting ways. What about the production? Well, that was a whole different beast. The team had just 18 months to write, storyboard, and animate the entire film. Lightning speed in animation terms, and significantly less time than they had for The Wrong Trousers. But this wasn't just bad luck or a strict publishing deal, it was intentional. It was intended as a proof of concept. Aardman wanted to see if they could scale up their process and produce high-quality work at a faster pace, laying the groundwork for eventually tackling feature-length films. It was no doubt an ambitious goal, turning what had been a small artisanal operation, just Nick Park and a few animators, into a well-oiled, larger-scale production pipeline. With the clock ticking, the team brought in more animators, but scaling up came with its own problems. Nick Park realised that the combination of a larger team of animators and the handmade nature of the Aardman style meant that there was a higher risk of character details being changed, depending on who was animating the scene. Park developed a number of techniques to minimise the impact of the inconsistencies. One such example comes from efforts to avoid Wallace's face suddenly looking a little strange from scene to scene. To keep the characters consistent, they devised a clever solution: pre-made molds for Wallace's 12 main mouth shapes. Animators could press these onto his face, ensuring his signature toothy grin stayed, well, his. However, even with these efficiency hacks, the team's output was still painstakingly slow. About 5 seconds of footage per day, which was faster than before but still required a lot of patience. Narratively, A Close Shave took some exciting steps forward too. Enter Gwendoline, Wallace's love interest and the series' first proper romantic subplot. It was a fun addition, giving Wallace a few sweet and awkward moments while adding an emotional layer to the story. It also marked the first time a Wallace and Gromit short had more than one voice actor, which helped expand the world's depth and complexity. And then there was Shaun the Sheep. Originally intended to just be a minor character, Shaun somehow stole every scene he was in with his mischievous charm. Audiences loved him so much that he later headlined his own series and movies, becoming one of Aardman's most iconic creations. When A Close Shave premiered at the 1995 London Film Festival, it cemented Aardman's reputation as a studio that could deliver consistent brilliance under tight deadlines. It even snagged the 1996 Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film. By then, Aardman had proven that they weren't just a stop-motion novelty act, rather, they were shaping the future of animation. As Wallace and Gromit exploded globally, so too did Aardman. It was in the late 1990s when CGI animation was exploding, with hits like Toy Story and Shrek, when Aardman was approached by DreamWorks for a collaboration. Fast forward to 2000 and Aardman drops their first ever full-length feature film. And it wasn't just good, it smashed records, becoming the highest grossing stop-motion animated movie ever. It still holds this record to this day. That's not too shabby for a quirky film about chickens trying to escape their doom of becoming chicken pies. Now, the plot is as ridiculous as it is brilliant. A chicken farm turned into a high-stakes prisoner of war camp escape film. Chicken Run has a beautiful blend of humour, heart, and just the right amount of action to keep everyone hooked. Oh, and the cast is absolutely stacked. It was the perfect blend of Aardman's British wit and Hollywood star power. Right from the iconic opening scene where the chickens stage a daring escape attempt, you're pulled into this world of clay feathers and weirdly relatable chickens. That's Aardman's magic. The way they make everything feel so tangible and alive, even though it's all made out of plasticine. But let's be real, pulling this off was not easy. What started as a small project ballooned into a massive production. The budget skyrocketed from £1 million to £30 million, and Aardman's small team of 6 animators suddenly grew to over 80. For the first time, they weren't just a cozy little studio, they were working on an industrial scale. The stakes were high, but the creative drive was even higher. They had to be very innovative as well. The animators used motion control to make large groups of chickens move in unison, which was a huge leap for stop motion, and as always, the process was incredibly slow. Animators would move characters by millimeters between shots, taking thousands of photos just to make a few seconds of footage. This level of detail extended to every single frame. From the sets to the clay lips syncing perfectly with the dialogue, everything had to be flawless. Each second of the movie is basically a tiny masterpiece. The sheer dedication of the animators shines through in the final product. One of the animators joked that you have to be a little bit bonkers just to work in stop motion, and honestly, that checks out. In the end though, all that hard work paid off. Chicken Run narrowly missed out on an Oscar in 2001. Not because it lost, but rather because the Best Animated Feature category didn't exist yet. Chicken Run's success, alongside animated masterpieces such as Shrek and Toy Story 2, sparked the creation of that category the very next year. The legacy of Chicken Run ultimately proved that stop motion could hold its own in feature-length storytelling. After Chicken Run's worldwide success, Aardman decided it was time to bring their beloved duo, Wallace and Gromit, to the big screen. And so, the world got their first ever feature-length Wallace and Gromit adventure. Originally, the movie was titled The Great Vegetable Plot, but apparently market research revealed that children weren't exactly crazy about vegetables. Who knew? So, the team rebranded it as The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, and production officially kicked off in September 2003, aiming for a release 2 years later in September 2005. As for the story, well, it's Wallace and Gromit thrown into a wonderfully ridiculous horror comedy that makes subtle and not so subtle nods at classic monster movies, such as The Wolfman and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This time, our heroes are up against a mysterious creature, the Were-Rabbit, who's wreaking havoc on the town's prized vegetable gardens. The directors, Nick Park and Steve Box, dubbed it the world's first vegetarian horror film, and well, if that doesn't intrigue you, I don't know what will. But, as is the case with all things Aardman, bringing Wallace and Gromit to the big screen wasn't exactly a walk in the park. Aardman stuck to their stop-motion roots, which meant laboriously crafting 115,000 individual frames, one shot at a time. On a good day, they'd produce approximately 3 seconds of usable footage. 3 whole seconds. It took 5 years to pull off. That said, they did step things up technologically, introducing custom armatures to make the characters more flexible and expressive while still staying true to that classic claymation charm. The sets, lighting, and details, however, were on another level. They didn't just build a world, they created a whole vibe, oozing with personality and whimsical character. For the first time, Wallace and Gromit weren't just the stars of their own little world. They were joined by a whole cast of quirky townsfolk, brought to life by a stellar voice cast, including Ralph Fiennes, Helena Bonham Carter, and Peter Kay. The wider scope gave Aardman the room to build a richer, more layered narrative while still delivering all the classic slapstick and heart we expect from our favourite inventor and his long-suffering dog. But what really made The Curse of the Were-Rabbit stand out was how unapologetically British it was. Quaint cottages, garden competitions, and the ever-so-charming church fete. The only way it could have been more British is if the Queen herself showed up to hand out tea and biscuits. It was a love letter to the kind of idyllic, slightly exaggerated Britain that feels both nostalgic and timeless. But somehow that Britishness didn't alienate global audiences. Instead, it made the film even more appealing, with its humour and themes striking a perfect balance between local charm and universal relatability. Were Rabbit was a labour of love. It paid homage to the classic horror comedies that inspired the team, while pushing the boundaries of what stop motion could achieve. The hard work paid off, too. It became a critical and box office hit, winning a bunch of awards, including the 2006 Oscar for Best Animated Feature. It was further proof, if this was even needed at this point, that even in the age of CGI juggernauts, stop motion could still hold its own. And it cemented Wallace and Gromit's place as global icons, reminding us all why we fell in love with them in the first place. On Christmas Day in 2024, Wallace and Gromit made their long-awaited return with Vengeance Most Fowl, a co-production between the BBC and Netflix. Thanks to the BBC, the duo's British roots stayed firmly intact, while Netflix's involvement ensured the film reached fans across the globe. It's everything we love about Aardman, a perfect blend of a nostalgic charm with a modern twist. It placed the classic characters we know and love in a story with a poignant message around the potential dangers of AI and the risk we run of it being used to replace things that people are passionate for, in this case, Gromit and his garden, and the removal of humanity out of things we love. There's something quite funny and kind of admirable about that, with traditional stop-motion techniques being used to make a statement on cutting-edge tech, making a statement on a debate that's playing out in the real world right now. Aardman stuck to their handmade techniques to preserve the essence of the characters and their artisanal charm. To do that, they pulled together a team of over 200 people working across 32 different sets. But perhaps shockingly, animators still managed only about 5 seconds of footage per week. That's even less than Were Rabbit. That being said, they weren't afraid to use modern tools when it makes sense. For example, there's a ton of water in this film. Back in the day, Aardman would have used a mix of wax, cling film, Vaseline and resin to create water effects. But here, they brought in their CGI team to create custom digital water. There's something beautiful about that. They're combining stop motion, one of the oldest filmmaking techniques, and fused it with some of the latest cutting-edge production technology and produced something just unheard of in previous Wallace and Gromit entries. And the result is just stunning. This is also the first Wallace and Gromit entry without Peter Sallis as the voice of Wallace. Sallis sadly passed away in 2017, and he left some pretty big shoes to fill. But, in a positive note, Ben Whitehead stepped up, and honestly, he nailed it. Just look at how much his face embodies the character of Wallace in these behind-the-scenes shots. The story brings back one of the greatest villains in animation history, Feathers McGraw. The sinister penguin from The Wrong Trousers is back and just as terrifying as ever. And interesting fact, but Feathers wasn't even supposed to be in this film. The original script was about Wallace inventing a smart, guarded gnome, but it just felt like something was missing. Then came this eureka moment. What if Feathers returned and turned the gnomes evil? Suddenly, the story clicked into place. There's that one scene where Feathers is at the zoo, complete with his Bond villanesque pet seal, when he locks eyes with Gromit for the first time, and it's just pure nostalgia. That same icy, menacing stare we saw in The Wrong Trousers. It's back, and it's perfect. It's those exact moments that remind you why Feathers is just one of the best animated villains ever. And of course, just as a reminder, he does so without saying a word. In the end, Vengeance Most Fowl is a triumph. Equal part humor, heart, and suspense. It's a worthy addition to the Wallace and Gromit legacy, proving that Aardman's magic is timeless. I don't think I'm alone in having a level of apprehension when a beloved studio, game developer, or even a band announces a new entry in a series I love or some new material 10, 20 years after the last one. So often, off the back of the huge financial success, they balloon something too big and lose the charm that makes them what they are. But that's exactly what I love about Aardman. The second the credits rolled on Vengeance Most Fowl, I couldn't wait for the next entry in the series. I just love in every film they produce, they introduce a new technique or technology. The more financial success and backing they have, they invest entirely in preserving the exact method they've been using and refining for 50 years. They are so committed to the Aardman way. The storytelling and style of Aardman consistently stays true to its roots while adapting to new challenges. Aardman are truly a British icon on the world stage. I grew up with them, I watched their productions when I was a child, I continue to watch them now as an adult, and have the same level of enjoyment at both ages. Wallace and Gromit are just so timeless, and I look forward to sharing them with my children one day, and to see the series continue. As they have explicitly stated that they are going to do more, I cannot wait. They did, however, note, just please, give us some time. It takes a while. So, look, I know, I didn't cover everything Aardman has released. I missed A Matter of Loaf and Death, along with Shaun the Sheep, Pirates, and the second Chicken Run film, but listen, I needed to cap this video at some point. I think if I covered everything Aardman's ever made, with the pace I've gone, I think we'd be here until the next Wallace and Gromit film comes out. If you enjoyed watching this, I'd love if you were to give the video a thumbs up, or even give the channel a subscription. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I did making it. Goodbye.